A single scream, far away, pierced the shroud of sleep that held Daniel Andrews, still in a half-stupor. Blood pounded rhythmically in his head, like jelly being squeezed in a bag. What was that smell, he thought to himself, as awareness flickered back into his brain, a vague aroma of disinfectant mixed with a fetid scent that reminded him of an unclean school. The light seeping through his eyelids told him it was daytime, and he had that odd sensation of not knowing exactly where he was. At first he thought he was at home in bed, but everything felt wrong. Even the touch of the sheets on his skin was unfamiliar. He tried to open his eyes, but he couldn't. They were fused shut. He drew up his right hand, and fumbling his fingers against his right eye, he could feel it was coated in matter. His eyelashes like little crusted plant growths protruding from his face. His arm was already starting to feel heavy with this meagre exertion. What the hell is going on, he thought to himself, as he struggled to find the energy to scrape away this seeming self-made glue that was depriving him of sight. Then he pulled the sealed halves apart, and light streamed in. No definition, just a blinding white haze. He blinked, trying to clear his vision as he gazed through the narrow gap. "You're back with us, Mr. Andrews," came a somewhat authoritarian male voice. The clouds from his sight evaporated just enough for him to see that there was a figure stood over him, the blurred, vague outline of a man's head with dark, curly hair. "Where am I?" he whispered, in a voice struggling to find the fuel to propel the words from his mouth. "You've had a bit of a mishap, Mr. Andrews," came the reply from the misted head floating before him. "You were taken ill. Do you remember?" He strained his mind. Still blinking to clear his one open eye as he cautiously wiped the other clean. "I remember something. I remember going for a meal with my girlfriend." His vision cleared enough that he could see who he was talking to. A slim, seeming 40-something male, wearing a medical-style white coat. Daniel assumed he was a doctor. His smile seemed reassuring, if but a little fake. "A meal? Yes. Anything else?" this character then asked. "I remember we left and went to our cars, and we drove somewhere, somewhere we wouldn't be disturbed." "I know exactly what you mean, Mr. Andrews. Do carry on." "Please, call me Daniel. Dan. I hate my last name," he replied. "Anyway, all I can remember is that she left after, I was about to leave, but I needed to piss, so I got out, left the engine running, and the music on, and then all I can remember is standing there and feeling a stabbing pain in my neck." "Interesting, Daniel. It seems you were fortunate in your choice of seclusion. You were actually on our property, and one of our staff found you earlier this morning." "What's happened to me?" Dan asked. "You were unconscious when they found you. It took us a while to figure out exactly what the problem was, but acute appendicitis was our eventual diagnosis.
What does that mean?
Dan inquired. It means you have nothing to worry about, Daniel. I have removed the offending article, and though you are still in the grip of a blood infection, we appear to be getting the better of that. You will most likely be up and around in a few days. In the meantime, I will be your personal doctor, and you can rest assured that I have not lost a patient yet.
Thank you, Doctor,
Daniel replied as he put his hand down and pressed the bedsheets in the area he imagined his appendix was. It's the other side, the doctor interjected.
It all hurts. Is it big? The appendix?
Dan inquired, revealing his distinct lack of knowledge of human anatomy. No, it's quite small, actually, Daniel. But you will be sore for a while. It's the pain of the infection you can feel more than anything else, I'll wager. I've got to go now, but the nurse will be in shortly, and she can give you something for the pain if you need it.
Do my family know?
Dan whispered. Yes, they visited this morning, the doctor replied. But you were out of it. No doubt they'll be back soon when they hear you're awake. With that, the doctor left, and Dan could gaze through still, bleary eyes at the somewhat odd room he was convalescing in. The bed he was lying on was large, metal-framed, and the grey paint it had once possessed was chipped and scuffed, to the point that it no longer served any useful purpose. The slightly grubby room was not overly spacious, painted light blue but not recently by the look of it, and it had two large sash windows, one either side of the bed. From the little he could see as he turned his head, it appeared he was high up, maybe 3 or 4 stories off the ground, a calculation he made based on the fact that he could see large, near-distant treetops at his eye level, other than one small dishevelled white wooden cabinet, and the drip stand containing some fluid connected to his arm. There was nothing else in the room. He looked over to the white wooden door, and wondered when the aforementioned nurse would arrive.
I should have asked for my phone,
he whispered out loud, as he looked around for a button that could be used to call someone, should the need arise. But there wasn't one. At least, not one he could see. He felt exhausted, though. Even the little effort he'd expended already seemed to have taken what energy he had, and he closed his eyes and drifted into a half-sleep. A burst of bright light woke him suddenly. It must have gone dark, he thought to himself, as his opening eyes were greeted by the glare of the fluorescent strip light above him. A clattering noise at the end of his bed announced that someone had come into the room. He lifted his head to be greeted by a short, squat figure of a woman, dressed in a dark blue medical uniform, her hard, stern features crowned by a bowl-shaped ring of chop-cropped hair. Dan gave a croaking hello as his greeting, but she didn't look up from the metal push-trolley that seemed to contain various items and pill containers. "Time for your medication," she eventually said, after a good 10 seconds of awkward silence. It struck him how her voice was empty, as if she had no emotional connection invested in him, and as she approached him with a little plastic cup filled with pharmaceuticals, and then lifted him to a half-sitting position, her cold facial expression throughout did nothing to dispel the uncaring impression she was making on him. He took the pills and then the water she offered in turn, and as they grated down his sore throat, he wondered fleetingly why this woman had ever become a nurse. "Bedpan," she muttered. Yeah," Dan replied, suddenly aware that he really did need to go. "Or maybe I could walk to some proper toilets with a bit of help." He quickly followed, not particularly keen to experience the joys of bed-ridden sanitation. "Doctor's orders, you're to stay in bed," she barked back. He duly endured the embarrassment, and as she took his pan away, the burning hunger pains in his stomach made him inquire when some food might arrive. "No by mouth," she answered. "Really?" he retorted. "In case you need more surgery," she snapped. The clawing emptiness in his stomach made Dan wince at this news, and needing solace and comfort, he asked when his family might arrive. "Been and gone," was all she said. "Are they coming back?" Dan asked in a slightly choked, emotive tone. "Later," she said in response. He trawled his jumbled mind for anything else he needed to ask her, eventually remembering that there was no button with which he could call her, and on mentioning this, the woman, the nurse, unclipped a little device from her top pocket and attached it to his bedhead. "You should have been given one of these already," she murmured indignantly. "Push it to call someone," she followed. Dan looked at her, hoping to see some flicker of connection, but she merely refilled his water glass before grabbing the trolley and heading through the door. As it closed behind her, he half shouted, "My phone!" but she was gone with the click of the latch. The encounter had left him bruised and more than a little wanting to get himself back home as quickly as possible, but leaden limbs told him that wouldn't be happening today. "Maybe tomorrow," he whispered slowly, as he sank down, suddenly overcome by tiredness. "It was necessary to operate again, Daniel," were the words that brought him back from his slumber. Why?" was Dan's waking response. The doctor's face was again before him. "Complications," he said, "and the infection has done more damage than we expected. We had to remove your spleen, Daniel. It's nothing you can't live without. We've changed your medication. Don't worry. You'll be on the mend soon." "Thanks, Doctor," Dan replied in a hoarse tone. "You know you're a very lucky man, Daniel. If we hadn't found you when we did, you could have ended up losing a great deal more than you have done. Had you been taken to a conventional hospital, the journey time alone could have robbed you of your limbs." "What kind of a hospital is this, Doctor?" Dan whispered. "We're a private medical facility, Daniel, for a very exclusive clientele, and this isn't one of our main rooms, as you might understand, but given your condition and the circumstances you were found in, it would be unthinkable for us to have turned our back on you. And don't worry, there'll be nothing to pay. When you're back on your feet, that will be reward enough for us." Dan thanked him again, but in his pained and muddled state, much of what was said had only partially been understood. "My phone," Dan said, suddenly remembering that he still hadn't received it back into his possession. The doctor looked at him with a comforting smile. "I'll have a word with your nurse. She should have brought it to you by now, he replied, before informing Dan that he would return in a few hours, and that in the meantime he should try to get some rest. Dan watched him leave, and listened as the heavy door thudded shut behind him, followed by what sounded like the turning of a key. As he faded back to a stupor, that clicking of a lock hung in his mind, like some question yet to be asked, when he had the mental energy to formulate it. "Daniel! Daniel!" a voice said.
"Have I been out long?"
Dan asked as his eyes flickered open to behold the now familiar doctor's face before him. "Not too long," was the doctor's reply. "I have your phone for you. You'll be able to call your family now. It's such a shame they keep missing your visits when you're out cold." Dan made to lift his arm to receive the precious object, but he couldn't. Despite his best efforts, it was as if it was frozen and immovable. No pain, just a paralysis that he soon found also extended to his other arm. And then in a panic he quickly realized that from the neck down he was frozen. His eyes flickered back and forth. "I can't move, Doctor. I can't move," he said, in a voice that conveyed his terror at his condition. The doctor smiled. "Don't worry, Daniel. It's just the effects of the medication we have given you." Dan relaxed a little at hearing this, but before he could ask when it would wear off, the doctor asked him how he felt otherwise. Dan quickly realized that other than his inability to animate his limbs, he actually felt okay. His pains had subsided, and for the first time in days he felt fully awake. The doctor seemed pleased, as Dan confirmed how he felt, his wide smile conveying a sense of calm trust in Dan's mind. "If you like, Dan, I can check your messages for you. Maybe I could even call your family for you and hold the phone to your ear," he said. Dan sputtered out a single "yes" in agreement, but then quickly followed it with, "Well, you can leave my texts for now, though. I'll pick them up later." The doctor laughed. "Something you don't want me to see," he said. "A young guy like you has plenty to hide, no doubt, I imagine." Dan smiled and looked at his phone that the doctor was now holding aloft before him. "The trouble is, Daniel," he said, "the trouble is, I might have looked at your texts already."
"How come?"
Dan demanded in as friendly a tone as he could muster, tensed as he was by this seeming invasion of his personal space. "Well, we had to identify you, Daniel, didn't we? And that meant reading your messages to get information about you." Dan was soothed a little at this explanation. "You have been a busy boy, though, haven't you?" the doctor followed. "So many women, so little time, eh?" Dan grinned like a miscreant child who had been caught stealing cookies, like he'd done something naughty and fun at the same time. "Is it 5 you have on the go right now, Daniel?" the doctor inquired. Dan nodded.
"Yeah, and maybe a couple of others in the wings,"
he replied with a wincing glee that hid his slight annoyance at having his private life poured over by another. "A veritable Romeo, aren't you, Daniel?" the doctor retorted,
Don't worry, though. Your secret is safe with me." Dan gave a huffing, knowing laugh. "Thanks," he said. "I say it's safe," the doctor continued. "Safe in that no one else needs to know what an utter shit you really are." Dan's brow furrowed. He felt assaulted but unable to reply, as he was acutely aware that the doctor held his life in his hands. "I guess some people might call me a shit," he eventually said. The doctor laughed. Now, without Dan's invitation or approval, he was flicking through his old messages. "Here's one. Julia. I like how you told her she was the one you had been waiting for. In a text, no less. 2 weeks later. You ditched her. What was the reason you gave her again?" "That she'd put on a few pounds," Dan murmured. "Yes, that's it," the doctor answered, his mouth pulled wide in the shape of a smile that then evaporated almost instantly. "Then there was Candice. You told her that she was your sun and your moon, I see here. That without her your life would be meaningless. Yet 5 weeks later you dumped her for Andrea." Dan's mouth flickered with aggression. He so wanted this intrusion to be over. Normally he would have resorted to threat, but that was not an option. "Candice didn't take it well, did she? Do you remember what she called you, Dan?" the doctor inquired. "A putrid maggot that crawled into my life," Dan whispered, while turning away, conveying that he was in no mood to hear any more of his secrets laid bare. "What's the point of this, Doctor?" he quickly followed. "I don't think this is very professional." "Professional, eh? No, I think you're the professional here, Dan. I am just a rank outsider compared to a player like you. Maybe you could teach me a thing or two. Shall we talk about Andrea? Shall we talk about what you said to her?" "Look, I'm sick. I really don't need this right now," Dan seethed. "You told her she was your true love, your soulmate, that you could see yourself marrying her. You pushed the boat out for this one, didn't you, Daniel? Wouldn't she put out? Was that it?" "Just shut up, will you?" Dan croaked, in a feeble attempt to shout. "She had a good run, though, didn't she, Daniel? 2 months. Veritable commitment for you. And the reason you dumped her was... Remind me." Dan stared at the ceiling, stone-faced. "That was it. She was too nice. Nice and boring, you told her. After you'd had what you wanted, that is. Yet she didn't take it well, did she, Daniel? She had believed you, and she begged you not to cut her free. And yet you called her a sad bitch, I see here, and told her to stop harassing you. What happened to Andrea, Dan? Did she go away?" "How should I know?" Dan spat through clenched teeth. "How should you know, indeed, even though you told your friend, Aaron, what happened to her? Should I read it out to you, Daniel?" "Just get off my phone!" Dan raged, as he attempted once again to lift himself, this time with a little more success, as he could apply some upward pressure, but as he did, he quickly realized that something was holding him down. "There's not much point struggling, Daniel," the doctor rumbled. We had to strap you down.
Let me up. I want to leave this place. You're not a proper doctor.
I'm afraid that won't be possible, Daniel. I have one more operation to perform on you first. I'll read it to you then, your text to Aaron concerning Andrea. It says, "Just heard that stupid bitch has only gone and topped herself. Swinging from a rope she was when her mom came home. Won't be bothering me again. Ha, ha, ha."
I didn't mean it,
Dan said as he closed his eyes in a seeming attempt to shut out the public exposure of his callous wordage.
It was just banter, guy talk. I was sad, really. I felt bad for her.
The doctor took a long in-breath. "Ever the commensurate liar, aren't you, Daniel?" he said, long and slow. Dan by now was beginning to panic. He didn't know exactly what the game was, but he knew all was far from what it seemed. He struggled again to be free, but now he could clearly feel the straps holding him down.
"What do you want?"
he blurted out, having realized that only dialogue was now going to free him. "What every parent wants, Daniel. The best for their child."
"Fuck,"
Dan mouthed.
"She's your daughter, isn't she?"
"She was your daughter." "Quite a perceptive young man, aren't you, Daniel? Odd that you should be so, when you act with such disregard for the feelings of others," the doctor retorted. Dan fell into a blind terror, words of apology falling from his mouth, while he struggled once more to be free. But this time so he could attack the doctor and be free of him.
"I really did love her. I was just a fool. It was my parents' fault. They didn't love me,"
Dan said, clutching at any thread he could think of to verbally win his freedom. The doctor stared at the squirming, spittle-laden mess before him. "Do you think I'm going to kill you?" he asked. Dan stared into his dark pupils, searching for any fleeting hope. "I'm not going to kill you, Daniel. You can relax. I did want to. For the weeks I followed you, waiting for the moment to strike. So often I wanted to. But when you were standing there that night, relieving yourself, while I approached behind you, syringe in hand, as I plunged it into your neck, I knew that killing you was too simplistic." Dan's eyes widened, his pupils dilated as his heart pounded in his chest.
"Please, I'm sorry,"
he said through a choked throat. "Yes, too simplistic, Daniel," the doctor continued. "My first thought was to remove those troublesome baubles that motivate your abuses. But then I had a better idea. It was you that inspired it. Just before I tranquilized you, you were talking to yourself, calling your latest conquest a whore, for giving you what you wanted. Was my daughter a whore, too, Daniel?" Dan stared, his mind paralyzed in dread of what his fate might be at the hands of this seeming madman. He stammered, "She was special. I wasn't good enough for her. No one could ever have been." "You're right about that, at least, Daniel," the doctor replied. Yes, it was you, Daniel. You gave me the idea. You told me what really motivates you. Envy. You're envious of all those women who have what you want. You want it so much you'd do anything, wouldn't you? Anything to have it. And now you can. With that, the doctor pulled back the sheet that covered Dan's chest, revealing a black strap running over his shoulders, and beneath it, something else. You sick bastard, Dan hissed. Do you like them, Daniel? The doctor said gleefully. You should, as you've always been so obsessed with them. You're perfect cup size, Daniel. It wasn't my fault, you idiot, Dan shouted. You need help. Serious medical help. Maybe I do, Daniel. Maybe I do, the doctor replied in a smooth, unruffled tone that conveyed how impotent Dan's aggression now was. But not before I finish what I started. You're a work in progress, my boy. No, Dan said, unable to hide his horror at what he knew was being alluded to. Oh, yes. Again, you're very perceptive, Daniel. Those troublesome baubles will have to come off after all, along with their little companion. And then you shall be transformed to be the very object of your desire. Tears welled in the corners of Dan's eyes as he uncontrollably spat forth a tirade of pointless insults, followed quickly by unashamed pleading. Don't worry, Daniel. I'm sure you'll embrace your new life as a woman with all the gusto you have given to being a man, and you'll never have to be envious again. I'll get you for this, Dan spat at him. I don't think so, the doctor replied. I've been very careful, called in a lot of favours with powerful friends who have benefited from my skills in the past in dealing with troublesome intruders into their personal life. Friends who will deal with you once and for all, if I'm ever unfortunate enough to be arrested. It has always been just work, you see, Daniel, but this time it's pleasure. Do you know what my final pleasure is with you? He asked. Dan almost imperceptibly moved his head side to side in hopeless resignation. There'll be no anesthetic for you this time, Daniel. Every torture you have happily visited on others shall return to haunt you as you go on your final date as a man, a date with my knife.